Hello, hello. Welcome to my channel, friends. My name is Lynn, and I have a new flip of the Spellbinders January 2025 club kits. In this video, I'll be featuring at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card featuring the 3D embossing folder club kit, the glimmer of the month, the clear stamp and die of the month, the large and the small dies of the month, and of course the better press of the month. So because my flip videos do tend to be a little bit long, what I'll do is timestamp this video. So as you're seeing me preview each of the 5 cards that I make in this video, if there's one in particular that you'd like to see me make, then you can hover over the timeline and skip straight to just that card. But I do hope that you enjoy seeing all of these cards come to life, and I certainly had a lot of fun making them. I do want to also let folks know that I have changed up my club kit selections a little bit, so I won't be getting the wax seal clubs anymore. It's definitely still available as an option. I just won't be crafting with it regularly. So let's make these. Okay, so diving right into the flat card, one way I think to get a lot of dimension into a flat card is to emboss your panel, because for me, flat cards, the way that I've defined them is that it's your card base plus at most one layer of cardstock and then flat embellishments, if any at all. And really the spirit behind flat cards is that it's an easy mailer, because a lot of times if you layer a lot of mats and layers, then it might not be so much that the card exceeds the 1/4 inch thickness, but it actually might also exceed the 1 ounce limit that here in the US we have to send mail for just the cost of a single stamp. And so one of the things that I like to always try to remember to do is have some easy mailers on hand, so that I know that I don't have to weigh it or add extra postage, and I can just pop it in the mail and not really think too hard about or worry too much about it possibly coming back to me due to insufficient postage. So one of the things that I did was the better press of the month has this 2 really gorgeous butterflies, and it does come with coordinating dies. So I die cut my panel, and then I passed it through the 3D embossing folder. So the embossing folder gives it a lot of extra dimension, but it's not going to add extra weight because it's still at the end of the day just one card panel. And the reason why I die cut through it first is instead of adding an extra layer of this butterfly on top of this panel, I can just inlay the die cut butterfly into that gap and still stick to my rule of 1 layer on top of the card base. One of the things that you can get as a bonus if you are a Deluxe Caboodle club member, which means you have all signed up for all of the club kits, you get this extra stencil set, which allows you to really easily and quickly color up both butterflies. So it's a set of layering stencils where each stencil actually covers or allows you to color in particular areas of the butterfly. So it's not a layering one, I guess, in the sense that, you know, each one layers on top of one another, but it is a set of stencils that combined will allow you to color up the butterfly. So I'm choosing some really lovely metallics, and I guess that's a little bit of a theme for a lot of my cards. I really had a lot of glitter and shine and metallics on most of my cards this time around. So here I'm using another set of very shimmery inks to stamp out my sentiment with, and I figured while I was at it I would just stamp out a few different ones just so that I have some choices. And the sentiments are from the clear stamp of the month, which does have the coordinating dies. This month it's all sentiments, so all of the coordinating dies are to cut out the sentiments. And I've really actually started to like coordinating dies for sentiments. In the past I used to only just put them on like a banner strip, but it is kind of nice to have that close cut all the way around, especially because these ones are really neat because it's the way that I really always love seeing sentiments. There's like a mix of typography to emphasize certain words. So for example, the one that I chose for this card is sending you a little flutter of happiness. And the word happiness is in a scripty font, whereas the other lettering is actually in sort of a all caps block lettering, so that there's some really nice contrast between the two. And I'm gonna, normally I would use like a touch of foam behind there, but I did keep it flat per my rules. So it still stayed a nice flat card. Now onto my layered card, and I'll actually have 2 layered cards. So with the small die of the month, you have a lot of options for how you want to create the look of your dragonfly wings. And so what I did here was I took the die that just has the shape of the wings, and I die cut that out of white cardstock that I lined already with double-sided adhesive sheet. So I'm peeling off the liner to expose adhesive, and that makes it a lot easier to inlay some of these pieces back in. There's the second set of wings is sort of the I think some places call them like the skeleton die, where it has the outlines of the pattern to the dragonfly wings, and I die cut it twice out of a black glitter cardstock and a silver glitter cardstock. And then all I did was I took the silver inside bits and inlaid them into the black border, and I took the black inside bits and inlaid that into the silver border. So now I have 2 sets of wings. And this card's gonna be super shiny. So I've got all the glitter in the wings and the dragonfly body. I've got a silver, a very like high gloss mirror card that's from the Treasured Collection by Spellbinders. I actually think these glitter cardstocks were from Hero Arts, actually, because they have a little bit of an iridescence to them. And the reason why I chose that is because I hot foiled the foil of the month with a glimmer foil that also has a bit of an iridescent shine. It's not just straight silver. It's I can't remember the name of it now, but if you look at it as it's being tilted, you can even kind of see it now. There's like some areas that have a bit of a bluish greenish tinge to it, and then some areas, if you look more towards the right, it's got like a little bit of a yellow glow to it. So that's the iridescence in the hot foil that I used. And so the glitter cardstocks that I used, and later I'm gonna emboss here, and this silver embossing powder also is iridescent. It's got some of that rainbow shine to it as well. So this is a very shiny card. Lots of shine, lots of very subtle rainbow iridescence to this, which I kind of like how striking the black and silver is, but because everything has that hint of iridescence to it, it's got a little subtle rainbow effect to it as well. It's a fun card to look at, just because, you know, as you tilt it, it just has a very different look. And I didn't go too overboard with all of the layers here, but I did layer that glimmered panel right on top of the mirror card, which I did save the center of. So you saw me earlier on, I die cut the center of my mirror card, and then I die cut it out of plain white cardstock, and I filled in the plain white cardstock so that when I glue the black panel over it, it's still nice and flat and even. I've got a little bit of low profile foam behind the wings, and then I just used some 3D glue gel by Kalel to attach the body, because parts of the body extend over the wings and parts of it will adhere directly onto that black panel. So for things like that, I tend to, and for smaller die cuts like this, I tend to prefer my 3D glue gel rather than try to cut out small bits of foam. I've got a little bit of foam behind there, but mostly I use my 3D glue gel. And I'm going to do that with the sentiment as well. Actually, one of the nice things about this sentiment stamp set is that there are some really lovely sentiments, kind of longer sentiments, which I really like. A lot of them span really a lot of different occasions that you can use all year round. And like I said, I think they all have a mix of fonts, like one word that's very scripty and has like lots of loops. Like the descenders and the ascenders have a lot of loops. It's kind of a cool font. But there's also two really large words, smile and hugs. So I thought that was really nice, because then you can combine them both if you wanted. This is going to be a second flat card, and when I glimmer or better press, I like to just do up a couple different panels, and that way I have some choices. So this one I used a rose gold glimmer foil onto white, and from the Spellbinders treasure collection, there's a rose gold treasure collection that has like a variety of different rose gold specialty cardstocks in different finishes. So I use I think this is the satin mirror finish, and one of the nested kind of the more fancier nested shape dies from Spellbinders. You can kind of see the corners are a little bit notched, but they're not like just rounded. They're rounded, but they have a little bit more of a little bit of an ornate design to it. I thought it was kind of neat, and I thought it was a little bit fitting of the design as well. This particular glimmer plate, which is larger than A2. So that's kind of nice, because when you glimmer it up, you don't have to worry about, like, you can be assured that the design will go like right to the edge of your A2 panel if you wanted. But what I did was I die cut from that glittered panel this nested shape die a couple different times. So this larger one I have as a frame that I'm gonna use some low profile foam behind to give it some dimension. And then I went 2 sizes down from that inner aperture, so it kind of skipped one size. And I'm going to adhere this little piece to the inside directly onto the satin mirror card. So that's why I didn't really gut out the center. I guess I still could have saved like a little bit on the inside, but because I want that extra bit of rose gold mirror around that inside frame too, I kept that whole. And for the sentiment, that's a glimmered sentiment as well. But what I did was I glimmered the negative, and I used the negative of that thanks sentiment. Now onto my interactive card. So there's even like a third way that you can assemble the wings, and that's the third set of wings that you can use. And in that one, I made a rainbow version, but I haven't yet crafted with that version of the dragonfly. So I do have that ready to go. You'll probably see that as a separate project. But what I'm going to start my card with is the stencil of the month. And this one has multiple different stencils. It they are layered. Some of them do layer to create the full image. And although I think this too, nothing actually layers directly on top. I think you're just stenciling, if I remember correctly, you're just stenciling different areas of the flower. Oh no, actually some parts do layer. The centers of the flowers, I think do actually layer on top of one another. But it's really pretty, and it's actually the design is a really lovely frame all the way around your A2 panel. So I think that's a lot of fun. And for some of these, even like this one here, I actually inked up some areas in yellow. Those are the centers of the flowers. But I inked up the other portions in a different color flower. I think generally though, like you would normally use the same color per stencil, but I just didn't want to have too much yellow on this card. I wanted to add another color. So that's why I went with some purples, just to have something different to the yellow. And then the last stencil will be the greenery or the leaves. And I didn't realize it, but I missed some of the circles, some of the centers of the flowers. There's some really small itty bitty dots on that previous stencil layer. And then this last one is the leaves. So really pretty easy, pretty fast to create this border. You get some dimension with the flowers because it's actually pretty cool. Some of the flowers are, I guess, in two parts where you see some of the petals are kind of folded or rolled a little bit. So I thought that was kind of neat how they did the layering on that. And for the interaction on this card, if you saw my Advent shorts over on Instagram, or Reels, I guess, on Instagram, I did a interactive card for the bee, which I think was day 6. That was like my favorite out of the Spellbinders Advents, which I always really enjoy. But I thought maybe I would do a tutorial on that. And then I saw this dragonfly and I thought, oh, this would be perfect because this has wings too. So all I'm doing is cutting a slit through this stenciled panel. And I didn't even really measure how wide this was. So that can be kind of up to you, but the wider it is, the more movement you'll have in the wings. But if it's too wide, then you'll have a harder time hiding that slit. And if you notice when I did the preview of this card at the beginning of this video, when the card is in its default position, it's you can see the slit. It's not completely hidden. So if that bothers you, then you might want to position your elements a little bit differently. But I'm using some construction weight acetate, and I cut it to 1/2 inch wide, and I just cut those into 1 3/4 inch lengths. And what I'll do, I cut 4 of those. So these are heavyweight construction acetate, 4 pieces that are 1/2 inch by 1. You could do 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and I punched a hole on both ends. And I went about 1/2 inch below the slit on this panel, and I punched another hole. This is a 1/8 inch hole that I used my my big bite to punch through. And I also cut out a 1 inch tab or pull tab out of 120-pound heavyweight cardstock. And what I'm doing is I just punched a 3/4 of an inch, like half circle through the front of that panel. And I'm going to cut or punch that same 3/4 inch through the top of just my card front. This just makes it easier for you to grab onto the pull tab. If you wanted, you could just punch through the the stenciled panel. But by punching through both layers, then whoever gets this card, they can actually pinch the pull tab from the front and the back and be able to grab it more easily. So that's why I punch through the card front as well. And what you'll need are some of these little mini brads. So in total, we are going to need 4 of them. And we can start to assemble this. It's a little bit like an armature almost, but basically you just need to attach 2 of your acetate pieces to the bottom of the pull tab, and then connect 2 of your acetate pieces to each other like this. It's hard to see because it's acetate, but I'm using the gold. It doesn't really matter what color, but I'm using the gold. You can see I'm like looking for my last acetate. The gold brad, these little mini brads, those are what I'm using to attach the 2 legs. We'll call them the acetate legs. And then the silver is what I used to attach those to the pull tab. It really doesn't matter what color you're using because these really shouldn't be visible. But I just chose different ones just so that you can see. So the gold one, it's attaching acetate to acetate. The silver one is attaching the 2 acetate legs to the pull tab. And then what we're gonna do, so we have these dangly legs here, and I'll slip them from the back to the front of the card, and these get attached to one another, and they get attached to the card front through that hole that we punched through this panel. And it's a little bit easier to hide the brad if you put the head of the brad through from the back of the panel, and then flatten it when it's come through the front, and then loop your 2 acetate legs to that. Then it's a little bit flatter on the front, so it makes it a little bit easier to hide, and also makes it easier later to attach our butterfly wings, because that's what will create the movement of the 2 butterfly wings. Now for now, I closed it just so that I can test the mechanism. So you can kind of see, here's how it sits when your card is pushed all the way down closed. And then when you pull the pull tab up, it straightens up the legs and then causes the movement. So this part here you can kind of ignore because I end up ripping out this little belly band. But if you have more room to work with on your card, you might need or want to create this belly band, because what it achieves for you is giving your pull tab a track to slide up and down without wiggling side to side, so that it pulls straight up and down. I ended up removing this because I don't have a lot of room, because I notched out that thumb notch to make it easier to grab onto the pull tab. And so that little bit of a belly band there actually inhibits the movement of the butterfly wings. And so you could do this and leave it, it's just fine. It's just that the acetate was hitting up against that belly band when I knew it could have gone further. And if you can pull up these legs further, then that means you'll get even more movement. So here's what it looks like from the back. So this is when your pull tab is pushed all the way down. And so you can kind of see that those legs are bent, and when you pull on this pull tab, because none of those acetate pieces are glued and into a fixed position, then those legs can straighten up, and that's what creates the movement. But when those legs straighten, they have to go somewhere. And so that belly band was actually preventing them from sliding as far up as they could. Now, I still need some kind of track or some kind of guardrail so that the pull tab, when it gets pulled, it's going straight up and down and not, wiggling from left to right. So instead of a belly band, I am using a bit of foam. And so the foam acts as kind of like, when a kid goes to a bowling alley and they have the little bumpers on the sides. Basically, that's what it is. It's just little bumpers on the side so that our pull tab is just going to stay between those two bits of foam. And I added just a little bit where I did want the legs to kind of stop moving, and that way you can't pull it too far. I kind of misjudged that a little bit because it is possible on my card, you might have seen it in the preview, it is possible to pull it far enough to where you see the brad. I was trying to avoid that, but I didn't quite hit the mark there. But if you wanted, that's how you would prevent this from going too far up, is just choose to place your foam so that it stops the movement of your acetate, and that will govern how far up it can go and whether it gets seen and how much movement the wings get. So once I previewed that a couple times and I was happy with it, I glued this down to my card front. So you just want to make sure that you're only putting adhesive on the foam and that your foam is not restricting the movement of anything that needs to move, whether it's the pull tab or the legs. And that's all there is to it. It's a pretty easy mechanism, but it does take a little bit of trial and error. So what I would suggest doing, if you've never made one of these before, is to instead of cutting directly into whatever your final panel will be, maybe do a test panel. So I went ahead and cut out some circle acetate pieces. They're clear, so it's hard to see, but I also punched that 1/8 inch hole through the center of these. And what I did was I actually used a die from the Spellbinders nested circle die set. And the die didn't actually cut all the way through, but it cut enough through that I had a really good indentation that I can just use my scissors to cut around. You're not really going to see it anyways, so it doesn't really matter if it's exact. But I'm using these little circle pieces as a way to have a little bit more area to attach my wings. So here I'm going to take one wing and attach it to one leg, the left leg, and I'm lining up the circles, the little 1/8 inch circle that I cut through that circular disc, lining that up with the 1/8 inch circle that was on the leg, the acetate leg. And I attach both wings to that one disc. And on the right side, I'll do the same thing. So I have a circular disc here. I'm going to glue the circular disc just to the acetate leg. And I'm going to glue my dragonfly wings, both of them, to the circular disc. So now our wings are now attached to each of those legs. And that circular disc just helps to give a little bit of extra room, a little bit of extra space to put some adhesive. And because I used a dry adhesive, I can still kind of nudge them around a little, move them around a little, and test, of course, to make sure that it moves as much as you want it to. And then the last thing will be to attach the dragonfly body. Now, initially, I attached the dragonfly body to the brad that you see in the center there. Don't do that. I took that off eventually because that, if you attach it to that, then well, I guess you could do it if you wanted, but if you did it this way, the dragonfly body is going to move with the wings. See how it moves? And I didn't want the body to move. I just want the wings to move. I want the body to actually stay still. So to have that effect, then I just glued the body to the card panel directly, and that way it's in a fixed permanent position, and the wings are the only thing attached to those clear acetate legs. And the only reason why I made them acetate was I knew that I wanted a lot of movement on this card and that there would be a risk of seeing some of the mechanism, and that's why. But these wings are pretty large. I mean, they ended up actually covering all of the acetate, but I can still see the slit. That's the one thing I wasn't actually able to hide completely here, but that is something that, you know, if that bothers you, you can. That's why I definitely recommend doing like a little practice one, because if that bothers you, you could definitely reposition things a little bit so that the slit, that first slit that I cut through the panel, that it's somewhere that you can actually hide in full. But I still really like how it turned out. I think it's really cute. And the hello scripty sentiment, that's also from the small die of the month, so you get that as part of that set as well. There's also some flowers in that set which I didn't actually end up using. Okay, so now on to my last card. This is going to be my pop-up card, and the pop-up mechanism is going to be really super duper easy, but this project was a lot of die cutting and assembly. So the pink little flowers are from the large die of the month, but I did use the small flowers from the small die of the month that I just mentioned. I actually used them on this card. One of the things though that I wasn't super big fan of, to be honest, was those small flowers. I'm not sure why they did it this way, but the die actually cuts out the center of all of those small little flowers, the ones that I cut out of white. And then there's a separate die where you can like layer another piece for the centers of those flowers in the middle there. I'm talking about the flowers that I die cut out of white that have just 3 petals. And I kind of feel like they should have just left that hole. But I didn't really mind too much. In the end, I just put some Nuvo drops in the center just to close up that hole, because I didn't want to die cut the little itty bitty pieces for the centers. I mean, it's a little too fiddly for me, to be honest. It's one die that has all 6 flowers and one die that has all 6 of the flower centers, but they're tiny, so it's really, for me, kind of hard to assemble those. So I just use Nuvo drops. Now with this really, really gorgeous, it's like a greenhouse sort of. There's an outline die which I cut out of vellum. And then there's I guess I'm just going to continue referring to it as like the skeleton die, because it's like just the framing basically. I die cut that out of a gray, and I just used my Dottie tape runner to adhere. The Dottie tape runner is nice because it's kind of like, you know, your dry adhesive tapes on a roll, but what's nice is instead of like a solid strip of adhesive, it's little itty bitty dots of adhesive. And when you run it across, say, like a really delicate die cut, the dots will just, you know, attach themselves to your die cut, and where there isn't paper, those dots will stay on the liner of the runner. And so it really helps quickly get adhesive onto the backs of these really fine die cuts. Now for the front of my pop-up card, I like to always keep these pretty simple, because I feel like a lot of the fun of the card will be on the inside of the card, and if it ever gets displayed, well, in theory, or the hope is that it's displayed popped up, so that you can kind of see the inside. So I still like to have a little bit of a hint on the outside of the card as to what the recipient will see once they open the card. And since I went ahead and assembled and die cut a bunch of these flowers and a bunch of the greenery, I decided to use just one on the outside. Actually, I really like the outside of this pop-up card. It's really, it's a really, for me, nice, clean, and simple card. And that's something that I tend to struggle with. Especially, I struggle with leaving actual white space. A lot of times I'll like cheat on my clean and simple where I'll emboss a panel out of white and glue that on top of my white card base. And because it's white on white, there's still texture, but it still feels sort of clean and simple. But here, this is just straight adhered right onto the card base. And I did put a little bit of 3D glue, but not a lot, just a little bit under the sentiment, which is one that one of the ones that I heat embossed from earlier. Really, that actually could be a flat card, really. I mean, I used a little bit of the dimensional glue, but I think by itself, it would have probably still shipped just fine for the cost of a single stamp. Now, I do end up adding a bunch to the inside of this card, so I don't know if this is quite an easy mailer anymore, but if you just wanted to use the card front as an easy mailer, I think that would go through the mail just fine. But all the fun's going to be on the inside, so I started off with a panel. This is just a leftover panel that I don't know how long ago I made it. I think I'm not even too sure what I used to make it, in fact. Probably, I think this is from one of the Oso inspired hops, and it was just leftover panel that I splattered. And a really simple pop-up mechanism is just making essentially like a square out of, I'm going to use acetate because this sort of greenhouse, it's got the vellum, so I don't want to use a white cardstock because you'll be able to see that through the vellum. And I'm not exactly too sure how I will arrange the flowers, whether I'm going to put some behind the vellum or some in front. And so my safest bet was just to make it clear, and that way it's going to be less noticeable and I don't have to stress too much about trying to hide something white and opaque. Now, one of the things is that I'm assembling this, but I actually don't end up using what I'm putting together right now. So I'll talk through actually how to make these little pop-up stands in a bit. Because if you look at this die cut, one of the things I wasn't really paying too close attention to was that at the bottom middle, it's flush and straight. And then the two sides are angled. So that's one thing that I did not take into consideration when I put together this these pop-up stands, because I actually cut two pieces thinking I will put one far left and one far right, because I figured it's going to be easier for me to hide these little pop-up stands, because likely whatever I collage up, I'll probably collage from like one corner or the other, as opposed to having a pop-up stand like right in the middle. I ended up not doing that though, because because the only straight part is right in the center. Then the other thing that I didn't pay attention to was how big this thing is. So here I'm dry fitting it, and then I realize, oh my gosh, there's really only a quarter of an inch between, the fold of the card and where I can line up this die cut, so that when you close the card, this whole die cut gets hidden inside the card. So then I had to do a whole other set of pop-up stands. So my first score line is at a quarter of an inch, because that's how much space from the back of the card to the bottom where you need to attach the die cut. And then I scored at 3/4 of an inch, and then at 1 inch, and then I cut it at 1 3/4. So whenever you're making these pop-up stands, basically what you're scoring is the first distance is how far away from the back of the card do you want your pop-up to stand up. The next score line is how tall you want your pop-up box to be. So for something that's large like this, you might want, something a little bit taller. Then your next score line is going to be the same distance away, because now we're traveling, away from the card back up where our die cut will be attached, and then you have to travel back to the card back and then down again to meet at the fold. And so you always have to have your score marks kind of follow that pattern. And what I did was I put some double-sided dry adhesive where I need glue, and I'm using sheets of adhesive so that you don't actually see the glue marks. So I'm applying this edge to edge. And where you want to put glue are the two ends are going to be what get attached to the card base. And then there's one stretch in the front that our die cut will get attached to. So there's only like that 1/4 of an inch at the very top that has no adhesive. And so this is where it's going to sit. Now here's where I realize I really can't put these two on each side. It's not going to really be a lot of support. So because of the angles on that, on the two sides of the die cut. So I just put one in the center. And so I'm going to peel off the section that is covering just that 1/4 of an inch. So that section, I'm going to put the edge right up against the fold. And that 1/4 inch is going to be from the distance from the back of our card to the front of where we're going to attach our die cut. Then again, see, it travels up and then over. So if you fold this bit in half and peel off the paper liner on the other half or on the other end, then just close your card and it will attach where it needs to. And all that leaves is one last panel that has adhesive, and that should be the front of your pop-up stand. And you can put your die cut right up against it and close your card. And again, that's going to close exactly where it needs. Now, this doesn't have a lot of distance between the back of the card and where I've attached the die cut, because it's such a large die cut. That was basically the max of where I could place it and still be able to fit this entire die cut inside the card when you close it. So that's always going to have to be a consideration with pop-ups. When you close your card, you want to make sure that everything that you've attached to this will be hidden when the card is actually closed flat. But there's still like a little bit of room back there, and so I'm going to play with attaching some of these die cut leaves and flowers and whatnot. Some of them will get attached to the back behind the vellum, just to add some extra shadow, some extra, dimension to things. And I am going to attach some things so that they are breaking outside the edge of this. And so if you're going to do that as well, you also just want to make sure it can be kind of deceptive, because when it's stood up in its sort of 3D form, it's a little bit hard to tell exactly where that's going to land when you actually close the card. And sometimes it'll look like it's inside the card, but when you close it, in fact is not. So you have to be like a little careful. Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes not so much. So I'm just tucking things in here and there just to do a little bit of a dry fit of the composition that I want to go for. And also, once I found a composition that I liked, I took a photo. That way I can kind of have something as a reference for when I actually glue things down. Because when I go to glue things down, what I want to do is actually glue things that are on the backmost first and build up the layers from there. And so a lot of times it's hard for me to think about what needs to be in the background. So when I do my dry fitting, I like to have an idea for where the focal, images are going to be. And in this case, it's the largest flowers that are the dark red, because I think those are going to be, because of their size and because of red and how, striking a color it is, those are going to attract the eyes most. And so I always think about that first and then think about how to kind of tuck in leaves and stuff afterwards. But when I actually go to glue, I need to glue all of the leaves down first because they need to sit behind the flowers. And so when I dry fit, I kind of approach it in that way, and then I take a photo so that I know roughly how to reassemble it. And I'm using a combination of the Dottie tape runner and a little bit of liquid adhesive. Now, the only reason not to use liquid adhesive is sometimes when you use too much of it, it can kind of warp or crinkle up your vellum. And if you're worried about that at all, then you might want to be like a little bit conservative with your liquid adhesive. A few dots here and there shouldn't be too big of a problem on these leaves, but it is something that you might want to kind of take into consideration. But I don't think anyone's going to really be looking behind this vellum panel, so I don't think they're going to really be able to see if it did crinkle up that vellum a little bit. I'm not sure anybody would really notice. So I also used a little bit, just a smidge, of 3D glue gel. But the 3D glue gel is not really for the dimension. It's just because some of these elements are getting glued on top of like 1-2 layers of cardstock beneath it. And because it's such an uneven surface underneath these, the glue gel it makes it a little bit easier to actually adhere and get like a strong hold, because that glue can just kind of spread out to where it needs. So if there's some areas that are a bit more raised underneath because there's like multiple layers of cardstock or die cut elements underneath, then it'll just spread out beyond that. And then some layers, it'll just be making contact directly with the vellum. So the glue will just go where the glue needs to go. And that way it can make some good solid contact and be a little bit more secure. And that's the only reason why I'm using it, because you don't want it to be too bulky. This is the inside of the card after all. And so I didn't want to add like a lot of dimension. I'm only using it so that it's actually making some good strong contact so that it doesn't just fall off in the mail. And then the last thing I'll do is dot on some of these little small white flowers. And where I place these, they don't even really make sense because sometimes I'm just putting them in places where there's no greenery. But I wanted to add them as just little pops of color, just to add a little bit more depth and dimension, because I've got some elements like the really dark green, and then we've got some mid-tones in the pinks and the reds, and then these just help to kind of brighten up the scene a little bit with just these little pops of white. So I'm just going to tuck them here and there. I'm aiming for just an odd number. And the other consideration for placement of these little white flowers is if there's like an irregular kind of a overlapping of die cut pieces, I also use these to sort of cover those up. So if there's like a die cut that comes to kind of like an abrupt end that doesn't look super organic, I just put one of these little flowers. So I'm using them to sort of hide like joins, weird joins, and also just using them as just little highlight points. And that's the end of my pop-up card. Now there is one leaf that's a little bit hanging out to the side. Thankfully, I did have 3D glue gel behind that one, so I was able to sort of nudge that back in line so that it actually does not hang outside the card. But here is a final recap of the 5 cards that I made. So this is my flat card that features the 3D embossing folder, the Better Press Club, the clear stamp of the month, and the bonus deluxe caboodle freebie that you get, which is coordinating stencils that go with the Better Press Club. This is the first of 2 layered cards, and it features the glimmer of the month. The stamp of the month is where the word hugs comes from, and the dragonfly comes from the small die of the month. And it was hard to get this to focus. I was trying to get the iridescence in that embossing to come through, but I love the little kind of iridescent shine in the glitter and the embossing powder and in the foil itself. Lots of fun, that one. Very, very shiny. Then my second layered card also features the glimmer of the month. The sentiment is also from the glimmer of the month, but here I glimmered the word thanks, and then I glimmered the leftover foil to get the reverse. So that's how I got that little panel in the center there. And really great matching between the rose gold glimmer foil and the rose gold satin mirror card in the treasured collection. This is my interactive card, and it features the small die of the month. That's where the dragonfly is from, and the word hello is also from that same die set. And the stencil of the month is really lovely. It's what creates this frame that is a lot of fun. Really got a lot of different layers and colors to it. And so I don't really even know what this interactive mechanism's called. It's just kind of fun to do. And you don't even need a die for it. So lots of fun. So that's my interactive card. And if I had to do it over again, I would try to make it so that you can't pull it out to where you can see that brad that's attached to the pull tab, because that could create a catch point where it makes it hard to push it back down. And then my last card is my pop-up card. This is the front, which features the large die of the month and the stamp of the month. And then on the inside, it's all large die of the month. Oh, the only exception are the little white flowers. Those are actually from the small die of the month. So lots of fun, really easy pop-up card, but it's just nice, the contrast of having the single flower on the outside and then basically a whole greenhouse full of flowers on the inside. Thanks for catching my flip video this month. I'll leave links to all of the club kits in the description box below if you want to check any of those out for yourself. They will be affiliate links, so if you do shop my links, I'll get a small commission at no extra cost to you. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.